Pope Francis has vowed the Catholic Church will spare no effort to bring child abusers in the clergy to justice. The pontiff was speaking at the end of a 4-day Vatican summit to stop pedophilia in the Church. The gathering took place amid an avalanche of allegations against Catholic priests and evidence that their superiors concealed their crimes. In his address, Francis promised the Church would end its culture of cover-ups and decisively confront perpetrators.
Here I would like to reaffirm that the Church will spare no effort to do all that is necessary to bring to justice whosoever has committed such crimes. The Church will never seek to hush up or not take seriously any case.
Let's go right away to our religious affairs correspondent, Martin Gach in Rome. Martin, the Pope has promised decisive action against abuse. What's your reaction to his speech today?
Well, I mean, it was really quite impressive, mainly because I think it amounts to essentially a declaration of war, and to a large degree a declaration of a civil war within the Church. So it's very important to take into consideration that this was a statement made in the Sala Regia with only 4 journalists present, and it was made sort of essentially the destinatary, the interlocutor were church members. So in a very concrete and thoroughgoing way, essentially the Pope turned on his own church and said that essentially the praying, the good wishes, the goodwill, the penance and the praying has now come to an end. That will be part of it, but now actually criminal activity will be turned to justice. And, the implementation of that policy is what is left to be seen, but the fact is that this is a major change in policy approach to the question of abuse.
For all the tough talk and assurances, the Pope didn't actually apologize to abuse survivors. Why not?
Well, essentially because for 2 reasons, I think. The apology and the expression of apology and the conversation with victims was very much the top of the agenda of the last 3 years of the approach to sexual abuse. Not only that, in fact, in preparation for this summit, bishops and clergy that participated were asked by the Pope to meet with abuse victims. So, in a sense, I think that this has a lot to do with the fact that this Pope himself seems to understand that the time for apologies and good words has come to an end. In a way, the fact is that this conversation, the one that we actually witnessed, this address, the target of that or the recipient of that was not meant to be the victim, but as I said a moment ago, was meant to be the Church itself. So not only, it was obviously not the place to apologize to victims because he was talking to the Church, but he took actually a very, very deliberately, very aggressive position in relation to the crimes committed. He actually talked about evil, essentially, within the Church, and the clergy and clericalism being essentially the very condition for sustaining, aiding and abetting this kind of criminal activity. So just to make another very important point very clear, we're no longer talking about sins. The Church for the last 20 years, since 2001, when the Boston Globe brought this into full view, despite all previous suspicions and previous reports, the Church has been talking about sinning against other human beings and sinning against God. Now, this Pope and this Church is actually talking about crimes, and that means essentially bringing in justice systems.
The Pope's speech wasn't particularly big on specific commitments, though. Why do you think he singled out specific problems like child pornography, for example?
Well, I'm not entirely sure that it wasn't about specific commitments. I think that there were several specific elements that were offered during these 4 days, but very particularly this turning to justice is a very specific, proposition. I think that it was very telling that he talked about pornography. once again, he was not talking about pornography in the wider context in society. He was talking essentially about the use of child pornography within the church. I mean, I don't think I have any memory of seeing a pope, seeing bishops or cardinals, let alone a pope, essentially accuse the church, turning onto the church and accusing the church and its officials of aiding and abetting the use of child pornography. I mean, in this sense, I think that it's fair to say that despite common wisdom as to what is that happened here, it will take days probably to process this speech. Something truly momentous just took place. The question is, how is it that this is going to be implemented? But, this is, in a sense, God and the devil is always in the details, of course.
Mr. Martin Gak, thank you very much.